Okay, so what I want to do today is to shift to a completely different period. And that really is uh, the exile from Jerusalem and the exile really of the people of Israel to Babylonia and then their return, and focus on the leadership in the return. Uh, Today we'll look at Zerubbabel, and then we'll be looking at Ezra and Nehemiah down the road. So let me share my screen. Okay, so here we have just a passage from the book of Kings, Second Kings. This is a reference to Nebuchadnezzar, who was, of course, the king of Babylon. He exiled all of Jerusalem, all the commanders, warriors, 10,000 exiles, as well as the artisans and smiths. Only the poorest people in the land were left. And he deports Jehoiakim to Babylon, the king's mother, wives, and officers, the notables of the land, were brought as exiles from Jerusalem to Babylon. All the able men, the number of 7,000 warriors trained in battle, 1,000 artisans and smiths, were brought to Babylon as exiles. So here we see really that in the year 586, uh, Jerusalem is destroyed and the people are exiled. And the question, of course, is why are they exiled? And the assumption is that he doesn't want them to reconstitute themselves. He doesn't essentially want to have to rule over a captive people. And it was fairly common in antiquity to move people around once you conquered them. Uh, I was just studying this week the story of Joseph with my grandson, and there's a detail in that story that I had forgotten until I read it. Joseph, he uses the famine. He enables the king essentially to take possession of the Pharaoh, to take possession of all of Egypt. The people come to him and they say that they are hungry and they spend all their money. And then the famine continues and they offer Joseph all their animals. And finally, they offer Joseph their land and they become indentured servants to the king. And he moves them around. He doesn't exile them, but he moves them around. Joseph moves them around in the land of Egypt. Having taken their land, he now separates them from that land and they become tenant farmers on lands that formerly did not belong to them. And so, this idea of conquest, in that case, of course, it isn't, and relocating people seems to have very ancient roots. I also think, of course, of Stalin, who moved large numbers of people around. At any rate, this is not an exhaustive list here, but the idea, I think, and the essential idea is that only the poorest of the people are left. And here we get this psalm, a well-known psalm, 137, been immortalized in song, of course. This is the experience of the exiles in Babylon. There we sat and wept as we thought of Zion. And of course, Zion here being synonymous with not only Jerusalem, but with the land of Israel, Judah as a whole. There on the poplars we hung our lyres, for our captives asked us for songs, our tormentors for amusement. Sing us one of the songs of Zion. And so we get this very visceral image that they are being toyed with, that their songs are being used now to entertain the Babylonians. And the response is, how can we sing a song of God on alien soil? We get this very famous line out of Psalms, If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand wither. Let my tongue stick to my palate if I cease to think of you, if I do not keep Jerusalem in memory, even in my happiest hour. Uh, so this idea is that the right hand, of course, is the dominant hand in general, and that it will become useless. And the tongue sticking to the palate means the person will become mute. And this idea, even in his happiest hour, even when he's doing well in exile, he should not forget Jerusalem. And I think that's a really telling statement because, as we're going to see, when the opportunity comes to return from exile, not everybody goes. And now we get this really strong statement. Generally speaking, when people want to quote this psalm, they quote the first 6 verses. But here we get something much stronger. Remember, O Eternal One, against the Edomites, the day of Jerusalem's fall, how they cried, strip her to her very foundations. The imagery here of stripping the city. Jerusalem is compared to a woman in the book of Eicha, the book of which we read on Tisha B'Av, these poems to lament the destruction of the city. And strip her to her very foundations seems to be, in some sense, a reference to Jerusalem as a woman who's being stripped naked. Fair Babylon, a statement which is meant, I think, to be ironic. It's a beautiful city, but no, you predator, a blessing on one who repays you in kind what you have inflicted upon us, a blessing on one who seizes your babies and dashes them against the rocks. I'm going to stop the share for a moment. And Saul, it's just you. Any comments or questions? Any thoughts on that?
I think Al Naharat Bavel was said right during the weekdays before Birkat
Yes,
Hamazon.
yes, it is. Although generally not. That is to say, I know very few people who actually say it. Even people who
Well,
are,
in the Orthodox, perhaps.
no, it's in the Siddur, but
Huh?
the ones I know, I'm sure, among Haredim, certainly they say it. But in general, it's not, at least among the modern Orthodox Jews that I know, it's not something that's said, though it is there. And it's striking. I think the juxtaposition is, if you think about it, we're praising God, right, for giving us this food, and also remembering our exile, which is in a sense a punishment from God. So it's kind of discordant in terms of its context, being used there. It is perhaps a reference to this idea of placing Jerusalem above our joy, right? That this good meal that I've just eaten and where I'm going to bless God, having been satisfied. Nonetheless, I don't want to remember Jerusalem. I don't want to forget Jerusalem because Jerusalem hasn't been rebuilt, right? So if you want to see, some connection, that's the connection that I see. But again, it just hasn't been my experience attending a variety of functions in people's homes as well, that it's actually said. Unlike Shir Hamalot, of course, which is said on Shabbat and holidays, which is really about the return. And perhaps that's the context. Shabbat is associated with the return, and the week is associated with the exile. So we have a strong contrast there. Any other thoughts or comments? Otherwise, we'll move on to the book of Ezra as we begin to see the beginnings of the restoration. Okay. So here, before we hit Ezra, I want to look at what Isaiah said about Cyrus. Cyrus, of course, the king of Persia. Persia will defeat Babylonia. Will conquer the conqueror. This takes place 52 years after the destruction of the temple and the exile of the people. Am the same. We've lost the beginning of the verse here, but it's God who says of Cyrus, "He is my shepherd. He will fulfill my purposes. He will say to Jerusalem, she shall be rebuilt, and to the temple you shall be founded again." Thus says God to Cyrus, the anointed one. And notice the language here. Cyrus is being a ro'eh, a shepherd who is watching over God's flock. And even more striking, he is Mashiach, the anointed one. He is not, of course, a descendant of David. The Messiah is supposed to be the descendant of David, but he is someone who God has singled out as a redeemer. And now God describes God's relationship with him, having grasped his right hand, treading down nations before him, ungirding the loins of kings, opening doors before him, and letting no gate stay shut. Of course, these are the gates of cities that he conquered. I will march before you and level the hills that loom up. I will shatter the doors of bronze and cut down iron bars. All these are the protections of the enemies. I will give you treasures concealed in dark and secret hoards, so that you will know that it is I, the Eternal One, the God of Israel, who called you by name. Or this idea that God calls someone by name, elevates them for the sake of might. But why? Why is God doing this? Is it because Cyrus himself is so worthy? No, for the sake of my servant Jacob, Israel, my chosen one. It is because God's relationship with Israel that he calls Cyrus. I hail you by title, though you have not known me. He's saying, in a sense, you are not one of my worshipers. And yet I have raised you. I've made you my anointed. I call you by name. Make no mistake. I am God. There is none else. This is not one of your Persian gods who has done this. Beside me, there is no God. I gird you, though you have not known me, so that they may know from east to west there is none but me. I am God, there is none else. I form light, create darkness. I make weal and create foe. I, God, do all these things. Pour down, O skies from above. Let the heavens rain down victory. Let the earth open up and triumph spout. Let vindication spring up. God who created it, shame on anyone who argues with their maker. Though naught but a potsherd of earth, shall the clay say to the potter, what are you doing? Your work has no handles. This is a great image and reminiscent of the verse that says, like clay in the hands of the potter, we are in your hands. Should the clay say to the potter, what are you doing? Shame on anyone who asks a father, what are you begetting? Or a woman, what are you bearing? Thus says God, Israel's Holy One and Maker, will you question me on the destiny of my children? Will you instruct me on the work of my hands? It is I who made the earth and created humankind. My own hands stretched out of the heavens. I marshaled their host. It is I who roused him, that is Cyrus, from victory, and who level all roads for him. And here, he will rebuild my city, and let my exiled people go without price, without repayment, said the God of hosts. Um, and we know actually that Cyrus did this. Now, the specificity here is this is the Israelite understanding of history, that God works through history, first to punish the people. It is God who sent the Babylonians to send them into exile as a punishment for their sins. And it is God now who, now that their sentence has been carried out and their time has been served, it is God through the instrument of Cyrus who brings them back. Uh, so it is striking that there is in the British Museum in London a cylinder which contains actually an actual edict of Cyrus from the first year of his rule, in which he says all the captives of Babylon, not just the Israelites, but all of them, can go back now to their homes and can rebuild their temples. So this is part of a general policy that he has, and it's doubtless going to bring him tremendous goodwill. Whether that's his motive or he has other motives, it's unclear. Uh, but this is not something that he essentially did for the people of Israel. It is part of a general policy. And it's remarkable that we have this cylinder, and we know this for a fact. Um, we're going to move on now to the book of Ezra and see it through the lens of um, the Jewish tradition. Um, and once again, and Sandy, you've joined us. Good. I don't know how much of that you saw from Isaiah. Did you see it at all?
I saw the last 5 minutes. I'm sorry.
No, no reason to apologize. Of course
I'll
not.
watch. I'll watch. I'll catch up with the video.
Okay. So I assume you have no comments on it then, or do you?
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Saw anything before I go on? No. Okay. Okay. So, and Sandy, just to let you know, what we're looking at now is leadership in the post-exilic period. We're looking at the leaders of the people of Israel as they return to Zion. As we just saw, it's being described in the words of Isaiah. This is second Isaiah. You know, the books that we call Isaiah, the book that we call Isaiah is really two separate books. The first one is pre-exilic and is talking about, in fact, what will happen to the people because they're sinful, very much like Jeremiah. The second is after the exile, and it begins with chapter 40. It seems that there were two prophets named Isaiah, and at some point in antiquity, their books were put together. But that is the consensus of modern scholarship. It was and has been for hundreds, not just contemporary scholarship. It's very, unless you want to say that the Isaiah of the pre-exile simply foresaw all that had come in great specificity, so that he knew about Cyrus. He knows him by name, right? And this is well before Cyrus even conquers Babylon. So at least it seems clear to me, following, of course, virtually all modern scholarship, that this is now, he was a post-exilic prophet, and responding to what's happened and Cyrus's decision to send the Jewish people back to their land if they want to go. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
So here we are looking at the book of Ezra. There are two books of the Bible, Ezra and Nehemiah. They both deal with this period, and they focus in part on the leadership in this period. Though Nehemiah is there, some scholars think that the book of Nehemiah was actually written before the book of Ezra. Some people think that Ezra and Nehemiah were originally one book, known as Ezra, because they do cover something of the same period. Ezra appears in both of them. But this is the beginning of the first of the two books in the order that we find them in the Tanakh. So, in the first year of King Cyrus of Persia, when the word of God spoken by Jeremiah was fulfilled. So, Jeremiah said that I didn't bring you that passage, but Jeremiah said that the people would eventually return, the remnants of the people would return from exile 70 years after the destruction of the temple. Now, of course, it wasn't 70 years. It was a couple of decades earlier than that. But nonetheless, it was what Jeremiah predicted, and it was fulfilled as God roused the spirit of Cyrus of Persia to issue a proclamation throughout his realm by word of mouth and in writing. In other words, he proclaimed it. This, by the way, this idea of letters and sending out letters and proclamations, of course, reminds us a lot of the book of Esther, where the king, also a Persian king, is sending out these edicts again and again. So here it is. Here's the text. Thus says King Cyrus of Persia, the eternal God of heaven has given me all the kingdoms of the earth and has charged me with building a house of God in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. So the God of heaven is not necessarily the God of Israel. And indeed, he is an idolater. And he is, it'll become very specific in a minute. So he says, but this is a little different from the historical record. God has not charged Cyrus to rebuild a house, a temple, essentially, in Jerusalem, in Judah. Cyrus is allowing that to happen, and again, among all of the exiles, Israelites and non-Israelites who are allowed to go back to their native lands and to worship their gods. May your God, notice your God, not my God, be with those of you among this people who wish to go to Jerusalem, that is in Judah, and build the house of the eternal God of Israel, the God that is in Jerusalem. So they don't all have to go back. Only some of them who choose to go back. This is, in a sense, the first real diaspora among the Jewish people. Jews who are allowed to return to the land of Israel, but will choose not to. And indeed, the Jewish community in Babylon becomes stronger and stronger, so much so that by the time of the destruction of the temple and the rabbinic culture that develops, the Jewish community is more in Bavel than they are in the land of Israel. They're doing well in Babylon. They seem to have succeeded there. They, as we'll see in a minute, well, let me go on. Notice the God of Israel that is in Jerusalem. So this is a common pagan idea that gods are localized to places. The God of Israel, unlike what we saw in Isaiah, where we had this long speech about how God controls everything, that God made the earth, that God created all humanity, that God did all of that. No, as far as Cyrus is concerned, the God of Israel is the God in Jerusalem. That is where that God is located, and that's where he can be worshiped. And now he addresses those who stay behind. That is, Israelites who choose not to go wherever they may be. Let the people of that place render assistance with silver, gold, goods, and livestock beside the free will offering to the house of God that is in Jerusalem. So this, I think, is really interesting. He is asking them, the Jews of the exile, the Jews who are in his kingdom and will remain there, to contribute to this effort. That Jerusalem, the temple in Jerusalem, even though they will be in Babylonia, in some sense will be viewed as their temple. And the king is urging them, Cyrus is urging them to contribute to it. And so what's the consequence? The heads of the clans of Judah and Benjamin, the priests and the Levites, all whose spirits had been roused by God, got ready to go and build a house of God that is in Jerusalem. And their neighbors supported them. Now, these are their Jewish neighbors, perhaps even non-Jews, not clear. He says all their neighbors. Is this because they're living separately? Or is this, in some sense, goodwill? It reminds us of the Egyptians who gave the Israelites upon their exile, who gave them, though they were undoubtedly felt compelled to do it. This was not a free will offering like it is here. Anyway, whether it's their fellow Israelites or other Persians, they supported them with silver vessels, gold, goods, livestock, precious objects, beside that which had been given as a farewell offering. King Cyrus now released the vessels of God's house, that these are the sacred vessels that Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple, from Jerusalem, and had put these in the house of his God. These King Cyrus of Persia released through the office of Mithridath, the treasurer, who gave an inventory of them to Sheshbazzar, the prince of Judah. So it's very striking. So the person who is in charge, this is sort of the treasurer of Persia, now is the one who is going to make an accounting of this, giving it to the prince of Judah, who is not generally mentioned except in this place. This is the inventory, and here we get it. All of these things, in all 5,400 gold and silver vessels. Sheshbazzar brought all these back when the exiles came back from Babylon to Jerusalem. All right. And then we get in chapter 2 a very long list of the people who went according to their families and their clans. Now, I'm picking that list up at the very end. I don't think there's any reason to look at it up to this point. And we will see that the total number who went was 42,360 plus servants who were and singers and then the horses and so on. But in particular, we have Tel Harsha, Sherub, Adon, and Immer, who could not tell whether their father's house and descent were Israelite. The sons of Deliah and Tobiah, the sons of Nekoda, of the sons of the priests and the sons of Habiah, the sons of Hakos, the sons of Barzillai, who had married the daughter of Barzillai, the Giladi, and had taken these names. They searched their genealogical records. They could not be found, and so they were disqualified for the priesthood. So here we see that these people returning now are ready to take up not only to rebuild the temple, but now they need to know who the Kohanim are, because they are the ones who can serve in the temple. And an accounting is being made, and we have these people who cannot prove their genealogy. And therefore, the Tirshata ordered them not to eat of the most holy things, that is, the sacrifices that are offered that the priests are able to eat, and also the truma, the tithes that go to the priests. So they ordered them not to eat of them until a priest with Urim and Tumim should appear. So there is no evidence at all that the Urim and Tumim existed or were used in the Second Temple period. They are part of the priestly garments. They don't come back as far as we can see. We have a list of what comes back. None of the garments are listed there. The Urim and Tumim had precious stones on them. One can only imagine that the Babylonians took the stones out and used them for their own purposes. That they would keep these garments whole is extremely unlikely. And the Urim and Tumim, as you undoubtedly remember, were a form of divination, so they could use them in effect to divine whether or not these people actually were of Kohanic descent, whether they had the priestly ancestry necessary for them to serve. The rabbis in the Talmud say that with the end of prophecy, the Urim and Tumim are no longer used. The prophets of Israel are said to come to an end with the exile, though we know, of course, that there are prophets in the Second Temple period. So we get this list, and the priests, the Levites, and some of the people, the singers and gatekeepers, the temple servants, took up residence in their towns, all Israel in their towns. And when the seventh month arrived, the Israelites being settled in their towns, the entire people settles in Jerusalem. And now we get two different figures. Yeshua, and who is the son of Zadok, and the priest, and Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel. I have a lot of trouble pronouncing these names. I'll undoubtedly mispronounce them. And his brothers set to build up the altar of the God of Israel and to offer burnt offerings, as is written in the teaching of Moses, the agent of God. And here we get a reference to the Torah, which we know now has survived the exile. And now they are coming back, and they will follow the specifications, the altar. We know those specifications, of course, from the book of Exodus, right after the Aseret HaDibrot, the Ten Commandments. We have a passage about the building of the altar, and that it has to be made from unhewn stones, and they do that. Now, who is Zerubbabel? He emerges as the leader of this community in Eretz Yisrael at the time of the return. And he's going to make a very fateful decision, which we'll see. And that's one of the reasons I want to look at him as an example of leadership. They set up the altar on its site because they are in fear of the peoples of the land. Now, this is unclear to me as to why that site is what they were doing out of fear. But it seems that there is hostility against them. And you can imagine that there are people who have been living there. And remember that 48 years have passed, and now they're moving back in again. And the people there are not going to be very happy. But this is a land which is under the control of the Persians, and they have a right to do what they've done. And the people who live there have to put up with it. At any rate, so they begin to offer these offerings every day. And now they celebrate the festivals of Sukkot, as is written, with its daily burnt offerings in proper quantities on each day as prescribed for it. And there are a great many offerings working their way down from 8 on the first day all the way down to 1, and all of it exactly followed by the regular burnt offering, the offerings for new moons, and for all the sacred fixed times of God, and whatever free will offerings were made to God. So, from the first day of the 7th month, they began to make burnt offerings through the foundation of the temple of God, though the foundation of the temple of God had not yet been laid. So they're not going so far as to rebuild, not yet. The mention of tabernacles is important because, according to tradition, that is when the temple was dedicated. And now they are going to move on to getting ready for the rebuilding. So the first thing they do is to start to use the altar. And now they're going to build the temple around it, or try to. They pay the hewers and artisans with money, and the Sidonians and Tyranians with food, drink, and oil, to bring cedar wood from Lebanon by the sea to Jaffa, in accord with the authorization granted them by the King Cyrus of Persia. So we have hewers and artisans who are being paid. Are these among the returning Israelites? Are they others in the area? The fact that they are paying the people from Sidon, these are the Lebanese who are bringing cedar wood from Lebanon by sea to Jaffa, which is the port. By the way, why are they paying them in food and drink? These are the delivery people. Presumably, they have paid for the wood, and the cedar of Lebanon, was what was used to build Solomon's temple, and now it'll be used again. So the people who are going to cut and build are getting money. The deliverers, the moving people are getting food, drink, and oil. And they go to Jaffa. And this is interesting to me. When I was in Israel recently, one of the places we went was to Jaffa, to Yaffo. And our guide explained to us that it was not the best harbor, but it was a harbor that was used for these purposes because it is the closest harbor to Jerusalem. And in fact, there were better harbors available, but then everything would have had to be taken overland. And in the second year after their arrival at the house of God at Jerusalem, in the second month, Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and uh, Yeshua, the son of Yozadak, and the rest of their brother preachers and Levites, and all who had come from captivity to Jerusalem, as their first step, appointed Levites from the age of 20 and upward to supervise the work of the house of God. So now this is in the second month of the second year, they're going to rebuild the temple. And here we get a list of those who are in charge of the work. They are priests because this will be a temple, and also some Levites. And when the builders had laid the foundation, the temple of God, priests in their vestments with trumpets. So did they make the vestments? Did the vestments come with them? Unclear. The Levites, son of Asaph, cymbals to give praise to God as King David of Israel had ordained. They sang songs extolling God, who is good, whose steadfast love for Israel is eternal. Ki tov, ki leolam chazdo, right? The words are probably familiar. They are hodu ladonai ki tov, right? Praise God, ki leolam chazdo, who is good, whose love, his chesed, lasts forever. And that's in a psalm. And so the sense here is the songs that they sing are psalms. And that was what the Levites did in the temple. They played instruments, cymbals, and they sang songs. And all the people raised a great shout, extolling God because the foundation of the house of God had been laid. So this is the first step in the rebuilding of the temple, and it is celebrated with great festivity. And here we get the priests and Levites and heads of the clans, the older ones who had seen the temple, right? This is, you can imagine that they were very young. This is taking place, they returned 50 to 48 years after the destruction, and 2 more years have passed. So 50 years have passed. And you can imagine even someone who was, if he lived to be 75, he might have even served in that temple in some capacity. And so they are weeping, and the younger ones are shouting with joy. And people could not distinguish the joy from the weeping. They raised a great shout, the sound of which could be heard from afar. And now we're getting to the next chapter, and I want to pause. So let me Okay. Saul and Sandy, questions, comments, anything at all before we get to the leadership of Zerubbabel? Yeah, Sandy.
Well, excuse me. No, I find this fascinating. I'm sorry, I didn't know any of this, and the fact that
Let me just stop you. Lots of people don't know any of this. These books are not widely studied. It is, and to the extent that people focus on the post-exilic period, it's generally through the prophets. Ezra and Nehemiah, historical books, generally not well studied. Many people know, I guess, that the Babylonians destroyed the temple, the Persians let the Jews go back, but the details you're not alone in not knowing this. Go ahead.
well, no, I'm also struck by the fact that they were doing. Do I understand they're doing sacrifices on the altar way before all this time, before the temple even started to be built, and while it's being built, so they were continuing that. Is that
Yes. Yes,
yeah.
it seems clear that they did. One would assume, yes, eventually they're going to build the whole thing. But it is the altar that is critical. According to Deuteronomy, remember that it used to be, and we saw that throughout the Torah, that people could make sacrifices wherever they wanted to make sacrifices. And we see cultic sites being founded, uh, by Abraham and Jacob, and they later become during the period of Judges. There were temples there. That's Hannah goes to one of those places and prays for his son. But according to the book of Deuteronomy, the cult becomes established. There's only one place where God can be sacrificed to, and that is God's chosen place, which is in Jerusalem. But Deuteronomy doesn't specify it has to be in a temple. It specifies that the chosen site is in Jerusalem. And the Torah itself specifies the nature of the altar, how it has to be built. And so it's not surprising. And one imagines that they are very eager, that these are the priests. They haven't been able to do this. Generations have passed. They haven't been able to do this. So they get there, immediately build the altar. And now the temple and this idea that the foundations are being, and I'm so struck by this, that the foundations themselves are just, this is an enormous celebration. Again, though, I would remind you, most of the people are still back in Babylon. And Zerubbabel, who emerges as the leader here, what is Zerubbabel mean? It's not like Moshe and David, right? Zeru probably from Zerah, meaning seed, right? And Bavel of Babylon, right? He is an acculturated Jew, not worshiping perhaps the God of Israel because there's no temple, there's no, right? Loyal to the God of Israel. So you get this sense of the Babylonian Jewish community, much of which wants to remain in Babylonia. From names, we get a sense of assimilation. We see that, of course, also in Persia, rather, but he has a Babylonian name. Also, we see it in the book of Esther. So Esther is perhaps related to Ishtar, Marduk, and Mordechai, and so on. Okay. Any other comments, thoughts? Yeah, Saul.
I was looking at the Hebrew, the Chol Ha'am, Riu Teruah Gedolah, the Hallel Adonai. I'm looking at the word Teruah and I'm thinking about the shofar, but apparently this doesn't mean the shofar. This means voices.
No, I think it means a musical
or
instrument.
shouts.
I think it could be. Remember, Truah is the sound of a musical instrument. And remember that they had in the temple, they had these silver trumpets, which they used. Already in the time of Moses, they're specified. And so perhaps that's part of what goes back. I think Truah there is probably that. I'll look into it and I'll report back next week. But that's my sense of it, that it is some kind of shofar would be easy, right? Because they have these animals and they're going to sacrifice them. So one could imagine, and they're going to sacrifice rams. And in fact, rams were sacrificed on the holiday of Sukkot. So it's plausible, but I don't think so. Okay, let me look into it. I'll look at some of the commentaries on that verse. Sandy.
So is it, excuse me, is it known that before Solomon's temple was built, the same thing that they would have, they had an altar that they sacrificed at a specific place?
Ah, don't know. I'm trying to think. I don't know. I'm not aware of it. You would expect, I mean, the whole question of religious life in the time of King David, because it's not till Solomon that the temple gets built. It's an interesting question. I don't really know. If you look back to the period of judges before the kings, we have other sites. We know that the ark is brought from Shiloh, which was a cultic site. One gets the sense, perhaps, Deuteronomy notwithstanding, perhaps there would continue to be cultic sites around Israel before the temple itself was built by Solomon. But I don't know. It's very hard. You can't really make arguments from silence. I'm not aware of a text that specifies it, but that doesn't tell us, what was happening. It's a great question. Anything else? All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a break because I see it's already 5 of. And what I want to do this, I had originally said that we would deal with this for 2 weeks, and then I would talk about Pesach and specifically looking at the verses relevant to the Haggadah. But I realized that in 2 weeks, it's the day before the first Seder. And I'm going to be too busy. So I'm not going to teach that week. I will do the Pesach stuff next week. And then when we resume, right after Passover, I will pick up with this text. And we'll be looking at the leadership of Zerubbabel, Ezra, and Nehemiah. Okay, so again, Pesach next week, no class. The following, I think, 2 weeks, and then we'll be back again after Pesach. So,
I wanted to mention one thing. Zerubbabel plays a very important part in some of these Haftarot. I see that all the time.
yes, yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that. That's something we're going to look at as well. Good. You are the Haftarah expert. I'm always impressed that you can sort of grab these Haftarot. Have you done a specific study of them, or just being in shul and hearing the Haftarah every week? Why is it?
I go over the Parshat HaShavua Friday night, and I look at the Haftarah also. And I'm also a B'nai Mitzvah tutor, so I have to keep up with this.
Yeah, all right. Well, we rely on your bikiyut, to be a bikiyut is expertise, right? You're a baki.
Not necessarily.
Well, no, but I'm
You're the expert.
really grateful. So I will. I'm intrigued now by that question. I have to make a note for myself for when we resume that we're going to look at Teruah, and I want to look at Zerubbabel in prophets. Okay, thank you for that. To see you next week. We'll be talking about Pesach. I'm going to send out a notice to everybody with this revised schedule, and have a great week. See you next time.
Thank you, Edwin.
Thank you very much.
Bye.